So what is penetration testing? Because a lot of people think, is it red teaming? Is it vulnerability assessment? Does it include social engineering? Is it phishing?
So you pose a really interesting question. And the challenge with this is that there's not clear language used to describe penetration testing that's pervasive across the whole of the world. And what I mean by that is, in some regions people will talk about pen testing, in other regions people will talk about technical assurance, other people will call it VAPT, people will talk about red teaming and threat modelling and threat assessments. And if you're a buyer, they all sound quite similar. If you're in the industry and potentially delivering those types of services, you might understand the nuances and the differences. But what we need to try and do as an industry is collectively remove some of the asymmetry that exists between buyers and suppliers, use less confusing language. From CREST perspective, I guess pen testing could include things like web application security testing. It could include social engineering. It could include things that are focused on traditional technology, OT technology, cloud technology. I don't think that I would choose to specifically contain it specifically. Rather, I would say that we typically recommend that when an organisation is looking at security assessments or penetration testing, they undertake some form of scoping initially. And really, the purpose of that is to understand what is the motivation, what is the goal, what is the objective the assessment is supposed to be delivering against. If you understand that, then potentially it will mean actually all you need to do is some form of vulnerability assessment. But if you're looking for something that has more rigour and you're looking to have a degree of exploitation, understand potentially the impact, that might move you towards something that's more focused towards penetration testing. If you say actually we're not looking at understanding all of the vulnerabilities or issues that exist across our estate, specifically you want to understand, could attacker compromise that one specific data set or that one specific system? In that instance, it might require an organisation to conduct a red team exercise. So ultimately, to answer your question, it's all driven by the scope. The scope will determine whether or not it's vulnerability assessment, whether it's pen testing, whether or not it's web app centric, whether it's social engineering or red teaming. And the key to having successful outcomes is to make sure that that scoping exercise is done by somebody that is technically competent. The threat landscape's evolving massively. Okay, if you want to go off and do a compliance-led assessment, that may well be point in time. If you want to have a strong understanding of what your risk posture is, that's probably not going to be delivered by something that's just point in time. You need to be thinking about ways to continually assess and continually stay in tune with the evolving threat landscape. So I guess ultimately it's having a clear understanding of what the goals and objectives are initially, for the buying community, making sure that they have a baseline of standards that are able to compare organisations against. And I guess the last thing would be having the ability to compare skills and competencies. It's really easy for an organisation to say we are highly skilled and we're highly competent and present something that is purely academic, or driven by qualifications. But many people can have skills and competencies that cannot be assessed through examination. And so we would suggest that organisations look wider, just to see, is this organisation involved in the community? Are they undertaking research? Are they delivering thought leadership? Are they generating tooling? Are there other richer ways to measure the skills and competencies? And of course, again, the last point is, all of those things I've described just now are going to be hugely relevant if you're trying to deliver an assurance activity that's simulating a sophisticated threat actor. If actually all you're wanting to try and do is something that's quick and compliance-led, actually maybe those kind of things will be less relevant.
Right,
maybe some basic level proficiency measured by things like CRT or CCT will be enough.
Right. So at the end of the day, the organisation, the buyer, has to know what its drivers are for engaging the buyer.
I think that's the biggest challenge. And when CREST engages with the buying community when things have gone wrong, typically it's because there was a disconnect in what the buyer thought they were looking for and ultimately what they communicated to the service provider. If the buyer goes into the engagement with a clearly understood set of goals and objectives, it's going to lead to a much better outcome in the assessment.
Well, I think ultimately everyone has to recognize the fact that, there's no 100% security, right? So no matter how much security assurance that you're looking for from your vendors or your, suppliers, there's no such thing as 100% security. And
no, that's right. I think it's going to be risk-based. I think it's going to be budget constrained. And we also recognize that things will evolve quickly. If we wind the clock back 12 months ago, many organisations had fairly robust security assurance programs. Log4j happened, and suddenly everything needed to stop, and they had to go off and do some firefighting. So you're right, there is no such thing as 100%. Instead of focusing on 100% or the best, we would absolutely advocate that people start focusing on good. Once they've got good, then get focused on better, and once they've got focused, then start looking at better. Often people want to shoot straight for red teaming when they're actually not doing basic vulnerability analysis or basic pen testing, or they're not doing something that's more continuous in nature. If you're not doing those kind of things, don't go off and have a threat-led red teaming.
You also have a framework called the Penetration Maturity Assessment Framework, don't you?
We do.
Yeah, but I think that's a conversation for another day.
That's a very complex framework that was built a number of years ago. But happy to talk about it on another occasion.
All right. So thank you very much, Rowland. Thank you.
No problem. Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
Cheers.